Shalom. This is Ron Warren with the Nuggets of the Torah. This week's teaching is the first parsha of Deuteronomy and the 44th parsha of the Torah, and is called Devarim, which means words. This parsha, it can also be called Rut, and Revival. In Deuteronomy chapter 1 verse 3 and 5 verse 6, it reads, "Now it came to pass in the 40th year, in the 11th month of the first day of the month, that Moses spoke to the children of Israel concerning to all that the Lord had given as commandments to them." And then going to verse 5 and 6, Moses began to explain this law, saying, "The Lord our God spoke to us at Horeb, saying, You have dwelt long enough at this mountain." The first stage we're going to talk about is the word rut. The enemy that is confronting the body of the Messiah today is when a routine becomes Lord in the congregation's life. Anyone can predict what will take place in the next week's service. And it's where nobody expects anything special from God. And if this happens, you are in a rut. The routine dictates. You can tell not only what has happened next week or what the next month will be, or if events do not change, what will take place next year. You have arrived at a point where what has been determines what is, and what is determines what will be. Now, this does not take place all at once. It happens in progressive stages. Too many are caught up in the routine and repetition without feeling, without understanding, without wonder, and with no happy surprises or expectations. And one step further is called a rut, which is enslavement to the custom. A rut has been characterized as a grave with both ends kicked out. The second stage you will move into is called rut. Now, this is best illustrated when the attitude of a non-expectationism takes over and spiritual rigidity sets in. This is the failure to visualize anything better or an absence of passion for improvement. This progression is very easy to happen. It can even happen when you are trying to add more people for your purpose. But to what end? If it's for more people to come and repeat the routine without feeling, meaning, wonder, or surprise? What is the answer? Is it in changing the routine? No. The congregation comprises of people. And whatever the people they are in the kind of a congregation it is, no worse, no better, no wiser, no holier, and no more worshipful. To improve the congregation, you must begin with individuals. You know, Moses says that it was an 11-day journey to Mount Sinai, and they had been at it for 40 years. The condition that caused this seemed to have an inward and an outward manifestation. There are 5 hindrances for a person to move on. Now, the first hindrance is your comfort. The greatest hindrance of moving to are the concerns for our comfort. And for 11 months, Israel were camped and lived at the foot of Mount Sinai and allowed the people to settle into a life of ease. They have grown accustomed to their surroundings. Life was good. In Amos chapter 6, verses 4 to 6, the prophet speaks of the nation of Israel, a nation that had become at ease and had no intention of being otherwise. It took them to task at being at ease in Zion. And if that is true of Israel, how much more is it of us today? The second hindrance is that of fear. Fear is the unknown, is the greatest fear of all. Often, our problem is when we rather hold on to what we have than trust in our future to God. Why? We have a hard time giving up the controls of our lives. But God says, you have dwelt long enough at this mountain. The third hindrance is living in the past. It's our tendency to want to be there. The past, both good and bad, keeps us stuck in the present. And if we fail in the past, then we're going to allow the past to tell us what we can and cannot be. We allow the past to destroy what God has for us in the present. But God says, you have dwelt long enough at this mountain. The fourth hindrance is the element of glorifying the past. And what it does is it gets us greater into our imaginations. Israel, like many of us, long for the good old days. But when you really consider the good old days, how many of us will really want to go back? In the good old days, things could be also rough. How many grew up in homes that did not have central heat or air conditioning? I did. Staying in the past, good or bad, is not worth the risk of God moving on without you. God says, you have dwelt long enough at this mountain. Our fifth hindrance is maintaining failure attitudes. And these attitudes have caused us to fail before. The children of Israel were only 3 days out of Egypt when people started to complain. And 40 years later, they're still complaining. They allowed a critical spirit to stall out their spiritual growth. Their love for the truth became deprived, and their praise turned into pity parties. Strife, bickering over the small things, majoring on minors while the minors became the majors, settling for mediocrity and staleness, all take center stage when a congregation gets sidetracked by a critical spirit. God says, you have dwelt long enough at this mountain. You know, sometimes the things appearing dangerous are less hazardous than a safe-looking alternative. I, for one, refuse to fly in a commercial airline, preferring rather to travel by an automobile. Yet I know that the statistics says that traveling by commercial airlines is 30 times safer than transportation by car. In the same way, following Yeshua into a new adventure may seem perilous, but in reality, it is the safest way to travel through life. The second step or third step was to take your journey, and that is revival. God had said, you have been at this mountain long enough. And now he says in the next verse, Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 7, turn and take your journey and go. You know, if you have been a believer for any length of time, it should prepare you for battle and ready for the service of his kingdom. And what are we being told to do? We, like the children of Israel, are to possess the land. We are to be actively pursuing the mission that the Messiah left for us to do, to reach a lost and dying community for him. What is the problem? You know, in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 14, the Apostle Paul says, therefore, he says, awake, you who are asleep, rise from the dead, and the Messiah will give you light. This message was not for an unbelieving audience, nor was it a message for sinners. It was for believers. And not only was it a message for any congregation, but Paul wrote it to one of the best congregations in the Brit Hadashah, the church at Ephesus. Our problem is that we've gone to sleep on the job. Now, when you're suddenly awakened, it can be very surprising. How many times have you gone to sleep extremely tired and the alarm clock goes off and you are startled and you think, it can't be morning? You know, it can also be confusing. Have you ever stopped to eat on a trip, and when you restarted, went the wrong direction, the way you just came? It can be a little upsetting to realize that you've gone the wrong way, but being awakened suddenly can also be shaming if we went to sleep in a place or a time when God is telling you you have been at this mountain long enough. It is time for you to move. Shalom. Until next week's episode of the Nuggets of the Torah. And if this teaching has been a blessing to you, consider subscribing to this YouTube channel.